Good evening. I'll call this meeting to order. This is the February 10th, 2026 meeting of the Shrewsbury Select Board. We will start with introducing board and staff members present. I am Teresa Flynn.
I'm Beth Cassavant.
Carlos Garcia.
Greg Richards.
Kevin Mizikar, Town Manager.
Keith Balding, our Assistant Town Manager Operations.
Juanita Anderson, Executive Assistant.
First item on our agenda is to approve the bills, payrolls, and warrants.
I move approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Item number 2 is to review and act to review the minutes of the January 27th, 2026 meeting.
I move approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The February 3rd, 2026 workshop was on the agenda, but the minutes were not complete, so we will pick that up next meeting. Item number 3 is announcements and reports. Board members, any announcements or reports this evening?
Madam Chair, I have two. The first one, I attended the Shrewsbury Housing Authority meeting this afternoon to learn more about their project on Elizabeth Street, where they're looking to add several units. They are partnering with the Massachusetts Housing Partnership on a grant to help support their work moving the project forward. There's more work and more information to come, but I'm raising this here with the board because the Housing Authority is seeking to partner with us on the project. They are going to be reviewing the deed to understand and make sure that they can move forward, and may need to amend the deed, which may require some action from us. And they also would like to see if the board would be interested in transferring about 1.5 acres of town-owned land that is adjacent to their site to the Housing Authority for this project, which could allow for them to create even more affordable units, as well as make sure that the size and scope of the project is in line with the character of the neighborhood. I think at some point it would be good for us to invite the Housing Authority to our meeting to just have a more formal conversation with them about what their ask of us is. And I will say, speaking as the board's designee to the Affordable Housing Trust, the trust has been very supportive of their work on Elizabeth Street, and I hope that we can continue that collaboration. My second one is Beth Cassavant and I attended an event in Worcester to commemorate Shrewsbury's contributions to Henry Knox and his noble train of artillery that marched from New York through Massachusetts 250 years ago. Henry Knox's noble train of artillery helped the 25-year-old general break the British siege back in 1776, which ignited the Revolution. Ms. Cassavant and I were honored to accept this plaque and a governor's citation on behalf of the town of Shrewsbury to not only commemorate our past, but to celebrate a patriotic American spirit that still runs deep in our town. So, Mr. Mizikar, I would like to present these to you and hope that we can find a prominent location for us to display these in the community so community members can reflect and enjoy Shrewsbury's contributions to our nation's founding.
Great, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other announcements? Okay. Item number 4 is the town manager's report. Mr. Mizikar.
Good evening, board members. I wanted to talk about two separate things this evening. The first will be about the town's response to the January 26, 2026 snowstorm, which of course was the large snowstorm where we got, depending on where you were in town, on the southern side about 19 inches and some spots on the north over 24 inches of snow that day. So I know there's been a lot of frustration in the community, and I just want to provide my perspective and let residents know that we hear you. We know we didn't perform at the top of our level during that storm. We didn't perform well. We've been working day in, day out once we got behind in that storm to recover, and that will continue if we can ever catch a break and not have a snowstorm every other day since then, with some real detailed after action reviews with all staff to make sure that we clean up the things that we think we missed in the storm and do a better job every time. I know staff performed really well this weekend. You know, we got 6 or 7 inches of snow on Saturday, and it was a good recovery, and we made sure we had a lot of resources in place. But I think it's important just to share my perspective, and I'm doing this without like, I'm not shaming town staff. We've all had these conversations. No one feels that we performed well, and everyone takes it really, takes it to heart, and everyone wants to improve and serve residents as best we can. So here's just a couple observations. I guess first and foremost for residents, I do want to let everyone know we have new staff this year. So we have a new highway director for the first time in 8 years, and Peter Lamoureux's doing a great job. A storm like this, being only on board since October and not having worked internal to town operations in the past certainly impacted our ability to handle a big storm. It was just, one contributing factor in this. But I did want to let residents know that. We also have 4 vacant positions at the time of our total highway staff of 9. So 4 of 9 vacancies. We've filled 3 of those since that storm and have more resources in place. So we've made improvements there already. We had some issues with some of our hired contractors that left early in the morning that Monday. So the contractors left without being dismissed by the highway director well before we thought operations were over and put us at a significant disadvantage. And then throughout the day with lower resources and snow picking up again in the evening with additional accumulations of about 4 inches, our staff and the remaining contractors certainly fell behind. We did dismiss staff and contractors that evening, and staff left at midnight on Monday after they were there for 36 straight hours of operations. They came in on Sunday at 9 a.m. and left at midnight the end of the day Monday, first thing Tuesday morning. Although that's a long amount of time, looking back on it, we left a little earlier. If we would have ran plow routes one more time, we would have dealt with that 4 inches of additional accumulation that we got in all neighborhoods. And we would have been able to begin kind of widening operations. So as the storm progresses, we're trying to keep roads open generally for public safety, depending on what snowfall rates are. And then kind of normal operations is keeping 2 full lanes clear, so 2 large vehicles like school buses can pass each other. And then when we get into post-storm operations, we begin treating treating the surfaces of the road again beyond plowing with salt and other materials, and then pushing back to get ideally curb to curb, but in a snowstorm of 2 feet, we're not going to get to that until a few days later in all neighborhoods. But once we knew we were behind and we started to see the issues on that Tuesday morning, we knew we had to get staff back in, so we were kind of simultaneously handling specific complaints where there were significant issues that were identified by residents in town, and then our general widening and pushback operations. That continued nearly on a 24/7 basis, where we had staff in overnight from Wednesday, January 28th through Thursday, February 5th. We also used contractors that we could rely upon throughout that to be working within neighborhoods. And I say it that way because it's really important that after we get so far beyond a storm, it's not fair for residents for us to just, as we're widening roadways and going past driveways, to fill people's driveways back up. I think most people expect that during a snowstorm or immediately thereafter as we're doing our operations. But if you get 24, 48 hours beyond the last snowflake, it takes extra effort because we then go back and open people's driveways up where an unreasonable amount of snow was pushed into it. So we have to have contractors that we can trust and rely upon to be able to do that work neatly and safely and thoroughly in every community. So again, just to reiterate, we've seen a number of things. We need to do full after-action reports with all staff. I do want to apologize to the community on behalf of all staff. We're seeing a lot. We have that young staff. We see a lot of cohesion. They're working a lot of hours together. When we asked them to step up after the storm, they really took it to heart, and we're proud of the work that they did, although it was days later than we all would have liked. They still put the time in, and no one really gave up. So I want to thank them for all their efforts. And thank Mr. Lamoureux, the new highway director, for his guidance and leading the recovery. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Baldinger real quick if I can. He wants to just talk a little bit about sidewalks. I know sidewalks are a challenge during big storms like this. We had some issues with equipment, but he can kind of put a finer point on that.
Sure. So we currently, we have two sidewalk machines. They are specialized pieces of equipment. One is from 2011, one is 2018. And we have to clear about 23 miles of sidewalks after every storm. Both of our machines, like I said, one's aging, getting much older. I think our team our fleet maintenance does a really good job keeping up on them. They have some specialized parts on them, so when they do break, sometimes they're not on our shelves, or they're not even on our dealer shelves, so they're difficult to get. But just to talk a little bit about the sidewalk operation, so when we get 8 inches of snow or less, the sidewalk machines have plows on them, and they can literally just plow the sidewalk, very much like a truck. But once we get above 8 inches of snow, it gets too deep, and so we have to use snow blowers on the machines, which takes our operation from having 2 machines taking about 8 or 10 working hours each to complete the route to 30 to 40 hours each to complete the route. So with our staffing issues, that gets extended, or if a machine breaks, it gets extended. So it's just, it gets difficult and lengthens that time. And I will also say, we've missed a few sidewalks that we normally are supposed to get during the storm, and then trying to get back there with both of these machines broke down last week. It's been difficult, so we apologize for that. Right now, we have 1 sidewalk machine running. This storm over the weekend, the one machine did the entire route by itself, because we're still waiting for parts from Canada for the other one. The replacement cost for these machines is about $200,000. So our team does work really hard to try and keep them maintained, but they're just one of those pieces of equipment that can be finicky and susceptible to damage or breakage just because of the workload that they have. So that's the sidewalk story.
Yep.
So.
Thanks. Appreciate that, Keith. So happy to answer any questions that the board may have. One of the challenges that we know we face in the public sector is we don't ever get to practice a 24-inch snowstorm without, doing it in real time in front of everyone, in the public. But that would always be awesome for us to work the kinks out, but promise we'll take this with our new leadership team in place and learn from it and try to get back to those expectations that we know residents have and that we have for ourselves.
Yeah, one question. Can you talk a little bit about when a resident wants to actually make kind of requests for service? I know that there was a DPW email address, but as far as the number of requests and kind of how is that tracked and resolved to ensure that if residents do make, at least bring something to DPW attention, that it is going to get resolved?
Yeah, so Keith can help me with this a little bit, but the vast majority of the complaints that we normally receive is through phone calls, and they are triaged by one staff member in the business management division, so central administration, and they're shared through a shared spreadsheet with the field leadership, and they prioritize those in a number of ways. Severity and safety is obviously number one, but if we can line things up, what our goal is to stay ahead of conditions or the sequence that we have for trash and recycling pickup. So that's how we're deploying our crews out on a day-to-day basis to be ahead of where we know we're going to have trash trucks and other services provided in the ensuing day. So in an ideal world, storms would line up and we could always do that, but that's how we kind of start to triage things after a storm where we're deploying a significant amount of resources. But I don't know if operationally there's anything else that happened that I missed.
The only thing I would add to that is after the large storm, the business management division, instead of just having the one person that normally manages, they brought some other resources in. There are a couple of other customer service people to help answer the calls and report out. But as Kevin said, like most of them are phone calls. People can email, and we also have a service portal through OpenGov on our website that people can send in stuff that way too.
Question. First of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has worked on the storm, right? None of us were here the last time we had this much snow, right? It was like 2015. So you were here, Keith.
I was here.
You were probably the one in charge of figuring out how to get rid of the snow. But again, like, it's a lot of new people working really hard, trying to do the best that they can. I appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that we're owning the fact that there was an issue, right? Because I know I sent numerous texts, numerous emails, got numerous calls from people, was blowing up Keith's phone a little bit, and, you know, being able to own a problem and say, okay, we're going to do this to fix it, goes a long way, I think, to bringing that trust in local government to residents. I think what I was hearing, the frustration was like, how do we do a better job of communicating while this is going on, so that when people are thinking that they want to send an email, that information that they're going to ask us might already be pushed out somehow through our own channels. So is there any plan to improve the communication with residents as we're doing the cleanup and going through a storm?
Yeah, we certainly can improve there as well. You know, during this storm specifically, you know, once you start to get behind, we're like, well, let's hurry up and try to get caught up. And then, you know, you realize at a certain point in time, we're just behind and we're never going to get caught up. And that, I mean, admittedly, it gets a little awkward behind the scenes. Like, what are we going to do? What are we going to communicate? How do we share this with residents as we're receiving a number of complaints that come in? I think this storm enabled us to create some standardized communications that we'll use before and during other storms that Mr. Walling created, and kind of talking to residents about what expectations should be during each phase of the storm, pre-storm, height of storm, and post-storm. And I think we can build off of that. We're also reconsidering, you know, our use of supervisors in the field and what they're assigned to do, and make sure that we can get better feedback from them and ensure that the oversight is appropriate in all sectors of the community. You know, during the height of a storm, certainly not making excuses, you know, 27 pieces of contracted equipment and, you know, 10 to 12, 14 other pieces of town directed equipment, depending on, you know, the height of the storm. So we're pushing 40 plus pieces of equipment throughout the community, and we need to stay on top of, you know, routes. It's not desirable, but easy to go past a road. If you miss a road the first time, you're probably going to miss it the second and third time, especially if you're a new contractor in a new area.
Mm-hmm.
My road was missed at one point. People wonder if there's any benefit to serving on the select board. No, I echo the comments. I mean, it's, was it perfect? No. Was there a lot that was done? Yes. And I do think that, you know, we have an appreciation for the fact that we are reflecting on what could have gone better and taking action to hopefully improve on it in the future. I think that social media, specifically Facebook, you know, we continue to look at how we can leverage that to get messaging out for those that are on there. You know, it's really tough. I feel for, to your point, a lot of town employees who are working really hard and doing a good job, and they're just getting blasted by certain residents. But I do think that the number of residents that show, you know, a little bit of patience and grace and kind of work with us to inform us versus criticize us is always welcome. You know, we're completely open to feedback, but recognize that part of it can be really tough.
And I think just last question / comment on this, because I of course also echo my gratitude for all the staff who worked really hard. It was tough. Signage, some street signs I think were perhaps knocked over or taken down during some of the plowing, and so just wanted to elevate that to make sure that that's something that's on our radar as
Sure.
Hopefully it gets warmer soon and the snow starts to melt, that we can replace those.
Yep, absolutely.
Anything else in your report,
I
Mr.
do,
Musicker?
yes. So moving on from that, I did want to just acknowledge and address, so on the Ask the Manager episode that was recorded on January 14th, 2026, I mentioned exploration of the use of fixed license plate reader cameras. And my comments were shared in an article that was subsequently published in the Community Advocate. And I just want to take an opportunity to clarify a few things here in this public setting from that discussion on Ask the Manager. So my reference to exploring these technologies includes staff level work only. It was done by the police department, and I have been briefed on it, and it has been part of, their requests in their ongoing operational scheme and platform. As the board certainly knows, when I said "we" in those comments, it was not looping the board in on that. I hadn't discussed this directly with the board and didn't mean to get out ahead of you, but certainly everyone should know that this was not a board and town manager conversation. My "we" in that circumstance was the police department and myself. Additionally, I just want to be really clear, as I said during that episode, that we're not moving forward with this technology. And anytime that we consider a technology like this, it would be done after broader community engagement and feedback about all aspects of it and get an understanding from the community. So we're not moving forward at this time. It's not in the FY26 budget. It was part of that conversation that we were having during that episode. So apologize for any confusion that caused. And that is it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Agenda item number 5 is public comment pursuant to Select Board Policy 31. We did not have any residents sign up this evening, and we do encourage residents to let us know if they are interested in speaking at a future meeting. Item number 6 is a 7:05 meeting. This is actually a public hearing, right? Versus a meeting. This was posted as a public hearing.
Public
Yes.
hearing.
Public hearing to review and act on a change of hours application submitted by Dean Park Shrewsbury LLC, DBA Dean Park Pizza and Grill. Hi, would you like to please come have a seat at the table and just introduce yourself for the record?
Hi, my name is Ujjwal Rawal, and I'm resident of Shrewsbury from 2006. And I recently took over Dean Park Pizza in October. Before pandemic, we were operating, like Dean Park was operating all days. But after pandemic, because of a short staff, they close on Mondays. So all the customer, whenever I meet, they are always saying like two things, like, can you bring the Monday back on, and if we can start for breakfast. So that's why I asked for change of hours, if I can do that. So Monday opening, and if I can get approved, I would like to serve for breakfast too.
Well, that's really exciting. So my understanding is that, so on Monday, you're currently closed, so you're asking to change your hours of operation to 5 a.m., from 5 a.m. to 2 a.m. Really, you're looking at 5 a.m. to 2 a.m. every day?
No, so the thing is like, not till 2 a.m. only on Friday, Saturday, not every day. But sometimes like, it's better to have little bit more room than less. So that's the reason I asked for 5 a.m. to 2 a.m. for all days.
5 a.m. to 2 a.m. for
Yeah.
all days.
So that includes like, Mondays and for breakfast. Both the things can include that.
But those will not be your operating hours.
I am going to operate for 5 a.m. The staff will come and prep work for breakfast. If we serve breakfast, I need 5 a.m.
Okay. Okay. And your hours of operation for closing, you're essentially giving yourself flexibility to be open to 2 a.m., but you are going to be closing at 9 p.m. most days?
Yeah.
Is that still the
Correct.
case? Okay.
But there's sometimes like summer hours, again, they're asking to if we can open for one or two more hours. Right now I have 9 o'clock, so we are not doing anything after 9 o'clock. But in summer, if I want to change, I don't have flexibility. That's why I asked for 2 a.m.
Okay, so you essentially asked for sort of the full flexibility.
Yes.
But those are not, because even your alcohol sales from 8 a.m. to 2 a.m.
Yeah.
sounds like that could be a really fun time. 8 a.m.
The thing is, like, and sometimes like
Bloody
in a
Mary
breakfast,
or
mimosa or something
mimosa.
like that.
Yep,
If
understand.
I don't have, then it's a problem. Yeah.
I understand. I just wanted to understand. Board members, any questions or concerns regarding this application?
But Sunday is 5 a.m. to 12 a.m.
So what, like, someone is saying, like, you can't have that in Sunday, especially in Massachusetts.
Yep.
So I want to follow whatever guideline is. I don't want to go beyond that. So
Yeah.
that's the reason I said
Yep.
12.
Okay. And town staff doesn't seem to have any concerns with the, okay. This being a public hearing, there's no members of the public here, but, so it looks like we can entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I will now entertain a motion regarding the application.
I move to approve the change of hours application submitted by Dean Park Shrewsbury LLC, DBA Dean Park Pizza, Grill and Pizza, located at 749 Main Street, Shrewsbury, Mass. 01545, subject to all applicable local and state laws, regulations, and conditions as deemed appropriate by the Select Board.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you so much for
Thank you
coming
so
in.
much for everyone.
I appreciate it. All right, agenda item number 7 is a meeting with Tanner Walling, Communications Coordinator. I think you want to discuss select board communication strategies. Would you like to sit? Would you like to stand, Tanner? Choice is yours.
Just right here?
Absolutely. Select board members, I think you know, for the past couple of years, we've recorded a video sort of promoting town meeting members and the whole election process. So Tanner was nice enough to help us with recording that earlier today. And it was a well-oiled machine. We were out of there in like 20 minutes. It's like nothing I've ever seen, so.
Which means the video is less than 20 minutes.
The video is way less than
Which is
20
good.
minutes, yes, but it was because Tanner was so organized, gave everyone a script, everybody came in, said their part, left. It was really well done, so thank you. And thank you to Mark and Cindy at SMC for helping us as well. We'll let you know when it's
All right.
going out prime time.
Do I just join the Google Meet to, oh, you have it all up there? Oh, perfect. Well, thank you, board members, for having me. Excited to talk to you today. After looking at social media analytics and feedback from the board, and looking at our From the Desk of the Select Board strategy, just wanted to, discuss with you today, bring some proposals for how to continue innovating and advancing Select Board communications, and what that looks like. So we can start off with our first slide. So with the current format, so From the Desk of the Select Board being the roughly 1 to 2 minute video series that's done post every Select Board meeting to recap the high level points about that meeting. Looking at the analytics, there were some issues that had emerged in the analytics. So for what I have here called the 12-second problem. So essentially what this is when a post is put up in the analytics, it'll show a graph of the video and what percentage of people are watching at what particular time. So it gives you an idea of where do people drop off. So for example, at the very end of the video, right before the proverbial credits roll, you see it drop to 0, for example, and it's generally a downward curve. But the noticeable thing was most videos at the 12-second mark, average watch time dropped, and then after the 30-second to 1 minute mark. So obviously, with wanting to get residents to get the information needed, this was something that I was thinking about. Also, with the current format, it's very direct to camera, so there's some potential rigidity with that. And another aspect I had noticed digging through our analytics was lower viewership. So at peak, From the Desk of the Select Board videos had achieved 1,700 views on a video. And And back in September, as a test case, I had tried a static recap post. So essentially, it was an image, and then like 1, 2, 3, and then it outlined with a headline what was discussed in a little description. And that achieved 6,703 views. So it's reaching significantly more folks. I found that's usually due to the shareability of said format. If you have that static recap post and there is something that was of interest at the select board meeting and you want to share it with your friend on Facebook, it's much easier to, share that post and say, hey, just look at bullet point number 2 versus, having to go through a video and say, okay, it's at, XYZ time mark. I attribute that as a cause because when content is very shareable, that shows the algorithm that it wants to promote it to more folks. And so looking through the analytics, these were some of what I had found. And then, so I noticed too that this current format exists between essentially two needs. So in the field of communications theory, there's a theory called uses and gratifications theory, which is essentially, put very simply, is the idea that people consume media to fulfill specific needs, right? If you're, getting ready for work and you want to listen to get the updates on the news, it's like the 15-minute podcast. But if you want to dive deeper on a special interest, that's where you're listening to your 1 or 2 hour podcast. That's kind of essentially the idea of it. People are looking to consume media that fulfills their needs, and so there generally is about two audiences in the case of local government information. So to put them into two categories, one is more of the scroller. So they're looking for that instant information. They want to know what happened at the meeting in a couple seconds, a minute. Just looking at the post, they get to see 1, 2, 3. These were the big takeaways, and that need is met by those static recap posts. And then there's other folks who would fall into the category more called like the connector. They're looking for, the nuance. They want to know the why behind certain decisions. They want to go more in depth and in detail. And so this need in uses and gratifications theory is met more by the format similar to the select board roundtable format that existed previously. And so the current problem with a 1 to 2 minute video format is that for the scroller, it's a bit too long. And for the connector, it doesn't dive in quite to the depth that they're looking for. So that brings me to a potential solution for that. So the static recap post, that is when I mentioned the one that had gotten 6,000 views earlier, that is the post that had gone up. This was actually an updated draft one from January, but it used the same format in September. So this was the benefits of this approach, right? First one is next day delivery from the desk of the select board video. That was writing the script the next day, Wednesday, organizing to film it on Thursday, and editing and publishing on Thursday and Friday. The static recap post would allow the select board to get updates from their meetings delivered the very next day, which would increase information access for residents. They would more quickly know what was covered in the meeting. The other benefit to it is shareability. Residents can, like I mentioned before, easily repost this graphic or share it with their friends without instructions on a timestamp. So it makes it very easily shareable, which, as I mentioned before, teaches the algorithm that its content it wants to natively share to more folks who may be outside the followers of the town's Facebook page. So it broadens access to residents. And then lastly, another benefit is trust building. So speed of communication reinforces transparency. Residents know that, they're getting the information quickly and getting the high-level updates on what they need to know, what's, the most important takeaways from the meeting. And then to satisfy the needs of the connector audience, would be a format along the lines of the select board roundtable, going more in depth with a longer, podcast format. And we can I'd love to chat with you guys and discuss whether, what that looks like. But generally a sort of video that is around 10 to 15 minutes or so once monthly where select board members can, sit down and chat and authentically talk with each other about what did the select board cover that month, what's on the horizon, things like that. So the benefits to this, first one would be unscripted and authentic. So it would remove the rigidity of the previous format, having to read, off of the outline, and this would let residents get to know the select board more personally, and see you more personally in conversation with each other. So that would be a benefit there. A second benefit would be the podcast format. So with Shrewsbury Media Connections podcast studio and in recent years new ability to put podcasts out, this creates two media products at the same time. So say a town resident doesn't have the time to sit down for the 10 to 15 minute video and watch it on their phone, but they've got to commute into work, they can listen to that on their way to work. So filming it and doing the video and audio at the same time, there can be multiple media products to meet people where they're at and meet residents where they're at. And then lastly, another benefit would be board members interacting. So this format would really allow residents to see the dialogue between select board members and see their unique perspectives on issues facing the town. And for those who wish to dive deeper and know more about, what's going on in town, this really satisfies that need to get to know select board members more, get to know the nuances to their perspectives, and etc. So, kind of in summary, what this change would enable, one, broader reach, more ways to reach residents with these updates, meeting them where they're at with the information they would like to know. This would allow for more timely information, so faster updates between meetings with those posts post-meeting, and then more depth when needed with that longer form roundtable content monthly for residents who would like to dive into more detail, and additionally more flexible production. I know from the desk of the select board format as it currently stood, because it had to be that same week, it was, it had to be filmed on certain days, and I know the select board is also working their full-time jobs, so it's very, it can be challenging to organize that. So this allows for more flexible production and easier scheduling for filming. And so what residents experience with this change would be faster updates on decisions, priorities, upcoming items for the board, as well as clearer context through those deeper dives in the roundtable discussions. And the result being residents would have more access to select board information with both the quick updates and the deeper context when they want to dive deeper. So I wanted to thank you for your time, for allowing me to present to you all, and we'd love to chat and see what the select board communications look like going forward. And I've included the different different proposals and ideas for what that looks like up on this slide to reference. And yeah, thank you again for your time, and I look forward to discussing your vision for select board communications.
Tanner, thank you. Thank you for all you're doing. You're doing really great work, and we're really grateful. I'll allow my colleagues to go around. I like your ideas. I definitely love the feed recommendations that you're making.
Mm-hmm.
I find the video recaps were a good sort of pilot test, but I agree with you. I don't think they're necessarily hitting the way we want, and I think you'd be great at getting information out a lot sooner. And I'm happy to share my thoughts on the roundtable, but I'll let you guys go around first.
That's good.
Well, thank you again, Tanner. Actually, I would agree. I like the static recap idea, summarizing kind of what the hot spots are. But honestly, I think the one area when I look at the recommendation on the roundtable, and I've heard feedback from the community in the past, and it's not directly related to what you're proposing. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk a little bit about some feedback,
Mm-hmm.
just in general about how the board operates. I think that there's actually kind of a third piece to this puzzle, because you use terms like, the unscripted and authentic, you get to know the board better, you get, board member intimacy, those are the words you used. And I think what I'd love to see, and I think I've shared some of this before with my colleagues, is, some of this I believe should be done in the meetings we're having already. Based off of what agenda items we're having, what we choose to have as an agenda topic, that we could have more things that were just discussions and not a review and act, where we actually had that time to talk, as Tanner mentioned, about how do we feel about certain things in town without having to specifically take action upon something, where we can allow, because we're in the exact select board meetings that we're having, that we could probably do a better job of digging into topics further and taking more time to have more open dialogue, which then, Tanner, could be used, for example, as you can edit that down into a shorter content, where I see the roundtable as maybe topics that, for whatever reason, aren't something that would be in this specific meeting, you know. And it's even, I mean, my belief too is, and I know it's probably maybe the minority viewpoint, is I think, you know, the workshops that we have, we could film and put out there, because it's the only time, and I don't know if a lot of the community knows this, is it's more of a, I think, a strategic discussion on, hey, what do you think about, or what should we be doing in these specific areas? And I know there was reasons and justifications on why those weren't filmed in the past, but if we really believe that we owe the residents, or that we should be providing more, like as you mentioned, some of these terms, which I don't disagree with, that authentic approach, or having people really get to know our viewpoints and us better, then I think we owe it to probably have different agenda topics and allow us in these settings that we're already having, instead of having to create yet another meeting for us to get to go and be part of. That's kind of my viewpoint on this. But trust me, as you know, maybe, I love the idea of the podcast and SMC part and putting those things out there. But I also don't want to neglect the fact that we do control what we talk about and what our agenda items are, and we could choose to have more of those open-ended discussions about broad topics in meetings we have today.
I think it's a fair point. I think that it's that balance of the reason we started this synopsis, if you will, several years ago, was because we universally heard, like, I don't have time to sit through a 2-hour meeting. Yes, we could extract sort of key segments of it. We actually tried doing that in a couple of different situations, but it's that balance of adding even more to an agenda where people don't have the time to tune in. And then we would do the roundtables, and we'd try to, like, sort of chunk it out and sort of pick those topics that we thought people wanted to hear our point of view on the most. And there was really poor viewership. So it begged the question of, what are we doing? So it's sort of a, you know, you get knocked if you're not doing it enough. There's sort of this, what are they trying to hide? You know, there's no transparency, versus, you know, you take the time to sort of make it all available, and very few people are interested in sort of the long format version. So it's sort of finding this, answering what we heard, which is, tell me what is happening, tell me how I can get involved when I want to get involved. Like, how do we sort of get that to people in a way that they can act if they want to?
Fair, but if we're saying it was a 10 or 15-minute video, so if you have a 10 or 15-minute agenda item that you're specifically clipping, I'm just trying to say that we're going to be adding another meeting where we all would want to participate, I'm assuming. So how do we coordinate that where we're giving everybody the ability to participate that's on the board and sharing those views, and, you know, and not putting too much burden on our schedules and everything else we're trying to do when we have the format, or we have the other 2 meetings already there?
Yeah, I mean, that's why
That's
I
all.
was sort of like, I
Yeah.
said I reserved my opinion on the roundtable, because I wasn't necessarily thinking, but I think that's a fair point. First of all, I don't think we would necessarily accomplish what we would need to accomplish with a board of 5 people in sort of a 15-minute time frame. But that's not to say we can't explore, you know, sort of both, and it maybe doesn't have to be on a regular basis, maybe it's on the occasional basis, and, you know, sort of combining that with, you're right, we do have sort of a business as usual, and I've heard it from residents too, where they feel like it is rigid and it's rehearsed and it's not authentic, and I think it's just, we're doing the business at hand. But I do think that, I think we all know now sort of the topics that people would like to see us, you know, maybe expand on further, and we should be mindful of creating time and space for that.
have a couple thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Tanner, for putting this together, for analyzing our dwindling and diminishing statistics on the video. I don't blame people. I would not want to watch them either. I think that, it's definitely not, they're not dynamic enough to keep people's attention. These are business meetings, right? I get it. They can be dry, they can be long, even at 1.5 speed. It's probably not engaging, but I do think it's really important to just keep in mind that this is a business meeting and that workshops serve the purpose of allowing us to dive deeper onto topics that, we are discussing, right? So I understand your point, and I think when the topic moves from a workshop to the business meeting, we could always do a better job of making sure that we sort of rehab the conversation, right? Just to remind the public that, there's no votes taken in a workshop. It's certainly just the opportunity for the board to kind of feel each other out, understand colleagues' differing perspectives, and then we bring something to a business meeting. Tanner, I am actually thinking about demographics, right? Because not everyone's on social media, Facebook, right? And I wonder what the demographic data is on the people who did engage with Select Board Roundtable, because I do think that there's a place for it. And maybe it's not something that you do every month, but I think when there's a topic that is just a really big one, right? I think of an override, a building project, things of that nature that you want to have that opportunity to dive deeper on and have a more informal discussion, or maybe even script it out to make sure that you're hitting the big points that you want people to know. I think that there's a place for that. So I feel with Select Board Roundtable, it's not an all the time, but it's more of an as needed. But I do wonder who's watching it, and sometimes I think it's more of the people who maybe didn't grow up on social media or didn't come to it more in their 30s or 40s, but maybe people who are more comfortable with watching Shrewsbury Media Connection on TV, the people who will call me up and say, what time does the Select Board air? And I go, I have no idea because I'm watching it on my YouTube app, right? But the people who aren't using those things, is there still an audience for whom the Select Board Roundtable matters and is important?
Yeah, I think I know the Select Board Roundtable videos live with the Shrewsbury Media Connection, so there's specific analytics on how much it's being watched, who's watching, would live with them. What I'm curious to know is it seems that where people there's definitely folks like you said who are watching on TV. There's folks who are watching on social media, and I'm thinking I like what you had said about the as needed basis for topics. For when there's depth that wants to be gone into. I'm not sure specifically about what the demographics look like, but I think with say one of those as needed Select Board Roundtables was done, we could then share it on social media, because so far as I know, I haven't seen that shared on say our Facebook page, and then that including the link to the video can expand the access to more folks, while also with Shrewsbury Media Connection filming it, they can also get it on public access TV for those who may not, be on Facebook or be on YouTube. Does that answer your question? Or
I mean, it already is on public access, but I'm just wondering if there's still an audience, I guess, that actually relies on and enjoys seeing a Select Board Roundtable type program.
Yeah, I'd have to take a look into analytics, and see what do folks, what are they looking for and what the audience is. So I wish I had more information on that, but
Okay.
having not seen
Just
it
something to think about.
happen before, yeah,
Right.
I think it's something definitely I can look into
Thanks.
for sure.
I mean, we had talked at one point about, to your point about everything is sort of talking out, and we talked about community engagement, so we talked about having just sort of a open Q&A, call it a forum, call it whatever, or doing live recordings of the Select Board Roundtable. I mean, we're definitely open to different things, and so I think that if anyone who is watching or hears about this, and maybe in your recap, you can encourage people to give us their ideas. on how they might like, what they want to hear more about and how they'd like for us to potentially reach them.
Yeah. I could even put a, Google form poll up to, collect people's responses and, maybe we get some more, a better insight into, what people are looking for, in terms of length of content, like you said, is it the Q&A? Is it a recap, like a roundtable video? And yeah, I'll definitely be sure to include that in the recap post.
I mean, with regard to the workshops, it's, could we record them? I guess we could. I think that, there is that balance of, I kind of look at it how I prep for a client meeting and my job and sort of formulating a point of view and sort of formulating the right approach. And it is a little bit more free flowing. And, so I'm a little bit torn on that, not because it's not like I don't want their, nothing happens without like a public vote. Like we're not trying to conspire. I think we're trying to sort of make sure that, we're organized and bringing, the best work forward to the community. So I don't know. I'm sort of torn on the whole workshop.
The only thing that I think tying into that is when I really looked at when you talk about this, I guess, persona, should we call it, like the connector. Maybe it's that person, and it's the people who want to know, like you're saying, the why behind the what, and that's, I think, what they're missing. And I think you can see it with the way, or people fill in gaps when they don't have what they are. You've seen it historically, right? People make, right, wrong, or indifferent. Maybe I was guilty at one point in time. But
not anymore, right?
Never. But I think seeing that, because I think that is missing, and I kind of back, Beth, I just want to, I somewhat disagree. I know what you're saying about it's a business meeting, but I also think that somewhat we owe to open up a little bit and have a little bit more dialogue so people understand some of that thought process, because they're not privy to the conversation, to your point, Teresa. They're not in the workshop and see how you formulated that opinion. And I feel like, I think there are people who would want, and I think we might get more, say interest, but I think more people would have maybe a better understanding of why certain things were done if we just had more dialogue, and I think there is a value in editing some of that down, or it's a agenda item. All you have to do is say it's agenda item 6. That's all you're showing people. You're not having to say parse through the whole thing or pulling that part out and say this was specifically done to talk through X, Y, and Z, which we know is a hot topic in town. So from my perspective, I think anything that goes on in town is our business, and I think how we get to decisions is business that we should discuss, and it doesn't have to be, and we can disagree on this, that rigidity and structure says, no, we're only going to talk about this. We can open up a little bit and humanize the board, which is what I kind of heard you say. Am I wrong that was what you were saying?
Yeah, I think that's that opportunity to just have that, like that conversation, like unscripted, just even if it's just you have a couple of topics you want to discuss and you dive into them, or if it's when there is a specific topic of interest, as Beth mentioned, with maybe there's a specific topic of interest, and then it's you all can have that discussion. I think that would be of benefit to the residents to see that sort of unscripted. This is like this is my perspective, and kind of that back and forth conversation.
Can I ask a real quick question, because this just came up and I wanted, is there, and maybe this is a broader piece, is it a policy piece, and maybe this is for you, Kevin, for not participating in, let's say, private groups like Shrewsbury forums that are online, let's say on Facebook, where a lot of members of the community participate? I know historically town would never post something there, so they would never post directly. It was always some resident would have to share. Is there any legal thing behind it, or is that purely a policy decision?
No, I mean, it's not a legal thing. It's a practice, and I don't even think it's a policy. But I mean, if there's a broad, kind of knowledge base out there from local governments across the country on engaging in forums and then expectations that get set and where does information flow from and what is the official position of the town and things like that. That no one should take this negatively, but you get kind of drawn into. People go to the community forum for many different reasons and pleasures and displeasures than they do when they look at the town of Shrewsbury's Facebook page. And honestly, I think respecting that space and keeping the town's official posts and the community forum separate is appropriate. And I think if we were to be in that space, we'd constantly be looked to respond. And I don't think we have the resources or the capacity to be able to do that.
I mean, that's been the primary reason when we've talked about it in the past, is that we just don't have the staff to like stay on top of it. And then people will get frustrated when they don't get timely responses. I've actually met with some of the administrators of the town community forums and had talked to them about, do we have like a town Tuesday where they help us with sort of summarizing or posting or, sort of being that conduit, because it does seem to get the most attention in town. So I think there are ways that we can continue to maybe look at leveraging it and maybe working with Tanner to find out how can we summarize information. To your point, Greg, if there's an interest or a demand from the community to hear us talk about a topic, like I'd love for them to send us an email or reach out and say, I'd love for you to carve 10 minutes into your agenda to talk about X. Like, I think we're open to that. It's more, I personally haven't heard that from anyone, so I think that I think we would be really open to hearing from people. And, you and I have talked about this in the past, Greg. It's sort of I'm not this sort of like by the book stickler, but I do know the rules of not talking about topics that aren't on our agenda. Like that is protocol. Right. So it's when we start to veer off course and you sort of want to have an authentic conversation. I'm not opposed to an authentic conversation. I'm sort of as the chair, of the meeting, I'm sort of like, we have to, if it's not posted, then it's not fair to the public that we sort of go on a tangent on something else that maybe wasn't, posted. So I think if we do take that approach and, put it on the agenda and let people know that we're going to be discussing it, I think it's really.
But I think once it gets on the agenda, then you've lost the unscripted. Because I don't know about you, but I don't ever come in here unscripted. Like, in the sense that I have thought about every agenda item and jotted down my notes and my thoughts and have like thoroughly tried to think about different positions and different angles so that when I come in here to the meeting, I am pretty much, where I know I'm going to be and what I'm going to say, or when I make comments that I've already sort of thought about them. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't know that you're going to get that unscripted. Whereas when I come into a workshop, that's sort of where I'm thinking out loud. I think once you turn on the cameras, it changes things. I think people are, or at least for myself, right? Like you have to be more thoughtful about what you're saying because it's recorded, it can be reposted, it can be watched a million times, and you can see it come back from 10 years past, right? So I don't know that you're gonna get unscripted as long as something's on the agenda. Like I think it's my responsibility as a board member to make sure that I've asked the questions I need to ask to be able to be productive in the meeting and provide my thoughts.
And I think we got a taste of that recently with, as the manager said at the top, the ask the manager conversation that you had, and then media picked it up, and then there was a lot of community feedback, and we weren't really ready for that. So it's certainly a balance that we have to strike.
What a beautiful example
Yeah.
that was of something that could come back and.
But I think these are all great. Like these are all really great suggestions. Like everybody's given excellent feedback and input. I think we just need to think about how we want to move forward and what we want to do. And I think that we do need to make sure that the conversations that we have in workshops, that we have as fulsome of a conversation when that becomes an agenda item in a meeting. And that's been a challenge for the board for as long as I've been on the board.
Well, and it's hard to get the authenticity, because once you do it, and until I have a conversation, it's like I'm rehashing a conversation.
We have to rehash.
Yeah.
We have to be comfortable rehashing.
Yeah, I mean, everyone defines authenticity different. Do people want to see us sort of waffling or not prepared? I mean, there's scripted, and then there's just prepared. And honestly, prepared for me is a sign of respect for everyone else. It's not because, yes, I think to your point, Beth, a lot of us think through things before we come in here, and it's more just efficiency and respect for the audience and the residents. And it's not because, some people might think like everything is predetermined, pre-baked. I mean, that is not always.
That's not what I'm
case.
saying. I'm just saying, like,
That's where I think the difference
right.
is.
I just think it's hard to be like, I'm not seeing this for the first time. I'm not thinking about it for the first time. So many of the things that we discuss have been, percolating and in the back of my mind, and something that I'm always thinking about. I'm always thinking about town stuff. It's
Yeah.
kind of how it is. I don't know. Aren't you always thinking about town stuff?
Oh, always.
You are. Come on.
Maybe not the same way you're thinking about it, but I'm thinking it.
Okay, well, that's possible.
No, Tanner, this is great food for thought. I think this doesn't require a vote, but it sounds like we're pretty unanimous for you to proceed with taking the recommended approach for summarizing the select board meetings. And again, if as someone who has never recorded one of your post-meeting videos, easy for me to say, if there's anything you need from us, please let us know. But we're happy to contribute to that. And I do feel as though you have a great flair for making it a bit more interesting and fun for people to, like when you said new late night pizza shop, like that's a great way of,
Totally is.
getting people to pay attention.
Yeah.
So we welcome it. We appreciate your creativity.
Thank you, and thank you for the time to chat with you guys. And
I just have some additional thoughts. And
yeah.
Of course, want to express my gratitude to you. I think Taylor Galusha got us to a great place in creating kind of the structure and the bones of this. And then when you stepped into the role, you have expanded upon that. And so I think that that's wonderful. And the community has, I think, responded very well to that. And I really appreciate all of the work that you've put into these, into the recommendations that you've made for us today. I think that the static recap post is great because we're, in a way, competing with things that are being posted online in the forums, as has been discussed. And we're also competing with local media. So I think having these blurbs come out, especially right after the meeting, and then hopefully you're also, I think, linking to our meeting for folks who are of the connector type who want to get more of what we're talking about, that opportunity to learn more. I think the podcast format is great. I enjoyed recording the videos with you on Thursdays because I think it was fun to have those direct to camera opportunities to talk about what we were up to. But they did feel sometimes a bit robotic, and it was just tough. So. And I know for me, one of the podcasts that I enjoy listening to, and I know I've talked to you, Mr. Manager, about it, is the GovLove podcast. And I think it's great to have an opportunity to hear from community leaders just a nice, authentic conversation about what's going on. And I think in one of our times when we were recording, you had previewed this proposal to me. And I think you had mentioned that it might be a one-on-one conversation with you and one board member. I just wondering if you could speak to why you moved maybe away from that and instead want to do like a few board members at one time.
Yeah, I think with the doing a couple, I was, tossing around ideas, trying to figure out what would be best. But I think my evolution of my thought process on that was that with the more board members present, you kind of get that, dialogue of, various board members maybe have different perspectives on a particular issue, and then you get with multiple board members present, you get to hear from multiple at the same time, the dialogue between them, and then I think that with for residents get that perspective where they get to see a little bit of one perspective, see a little bit of another perspective, and kind of make kind of get that nuanced information where they can see maybe you have some perspective on something that's unique to how you see something from your field, and Beth has some, other perspective that maybe has some overlap, maybe it doesn't, and then so that sort of kind of was my thought process, where multiple board members allows for that dialogue and the multiple perspectives. So then, people can put together nuanced opinions, get more nuanced information. That's why I had moved in that direction, because I felt like it would, both connect more board members in general with the public, but as well, it would do that. Initially, when I had formulated that, my thought was, the whole, being a Shrewsbury resident myself, it's kind of like the, kind of like I'm like standing in for the resident of, here, let me ask you some resident questions, or, explain this to me, as like a resident of the town, how does this work? But then, as I was, weighing different options, I figured, for the public benefit, I think it would be best to have the multiple perspectives, if that answers your question.
It does, yeah. It's helpful to hear that, because I think my initial reaction to maybe your initial proposal that we talked about, I appreciated you standing in as the resident and asking those questions. I feel like that would have been a nice opportunity to hear from a board member, the answers to those questions, and then I think it almost makes it easier to schedule it with individual board members rather than trying to figure out what time works best for multiple board members. But I appreciate your thoughts there.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I also agree with that scheduling was another pro I was weighing with that.
Well, the other challenge would be if we have more than 3, then we have to have an agenda posted, and then we have to have the door open and allow people to be there. And I don't know if that really facilitates it at SMC to do it that way.
Right.
I mean, I agree with you, but I just, unfortunately, we have to be bound by that open meeting piece, which could be
Very
a negative
true.
as well.
I agree. And then I think just my last thoughts on the communications piece, I really appreciate all the work that you're doing in the digital space. I know that in our workshop, there was mention that the print media format might be changing soon, and so I just wanted to share that I think that's something that we should see. I would like to see that continue, and so certainly that's a future conversation, future decision making on our part. But hopefully we can not just reach people digitally, but also in print.
For sure.
And appreciate your work there too.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tanner.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
being here so late tonight and being here and sharing all this great work.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time and having me and chatting about the communication strategy for the board. And I appreciate all your perspectives, and I look forward to the future of select board communications.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 8, which is an overview of the town manager's preliminary fiscal year 2027 operating budget. Mr. Muzikar.
Board members, I'm going to share some slides with you this evening and provide you with the preliminary recommendation that we have for the FY27 budget. I'll kind of just provide an overview of where we are in the budget process, any updates that we've made from the revenue manual when we published it in October, and then get a little bit deeper into the operating budget, which will be fully published and available in about a week. So that'll include everything in good detail except for the utility budgets, and we're still working on finalizing the capital components of each of those and kind of shaping the revenues that we have in place through the current rate structure. So a couple things as the slides come up. Just remind the board that we had about $1.4 million available on the municipal line items. That is a result of the expenditure caps that we put in place through the override model and commitment that we have with the residents, allowing us to, utilize recurring revenues and the revenues that we had through that model to prolong the timeline of the override, which, we're now working in the 6th year on. So Juanita, if you can just go ahead one more slide. So the budget as it lays out right now, we are using those caps and thresholds that we put in place. Right now, the municipal the education budget is just a placeholder. Dr. Sawyer will be presenting his budget tomorrow night, and the expenditure cap on that is 4.25% that works within this balanced budget model that I'm presenting. On the municipal budget, we are proposing a 4% year-over-year increase. This year-over-year increase includes money that is budgeted under the cap of the shared operating component of the budget. So on the municipal salary, personnel board falls under shared operating, and then we pull those funds into the municipal operating budget. So if you do the math on the screen that's there and look at the FY26 number compared to the manager's FY27 recommended budget, it's 4.89%. But that's because we've taken into account those funds that are budgeted in both of those components that ultimately end up within the municipal side of the budget. Happy to talk about that in any more detail. As the shared operating budget has kind of evolved, we're in a better position than I originally thought we were going to be. With health insurance, we have pushed and kind of shaped the outcome with the West Suburban Health Group to make sure that that the plans that need additional funding are the plans that are producing that revenue to cover the expense claims that we have through this joint purchasing arrangement that we have with 8 other communities. And so that's slightly lower than we anticipated. Looks like we'll have about a net overall increase of 8% versus 10. And then debt service is declining about 1.2%, 1.3% year over year based upon the long-term debt plan that we have in place and the recurring principal and interest payments. So if you want to go forward. So just kind of really pulling the whole way back on the budget, kind of a trial balance sheet that we have here, looking at all the revenues, 197.4 million, and balancing out well with the expenditures. That includes the operating budget and other non-operating budget components, including warrant articles that we're projecting, the capital improvement plan, state charges, utility expenses, et cetera. So we are, of course, required under the general laws to produce a balanced budget, and that's what will come out next week through our recommendation, although we are, as I said before, tweaking the total costs and capital needs within the utility budget still. So looking a little deeper into the revenues, what has changed since we produced the revenue manual? I just want to touch on a couple things. State aid revenues are greater than we anticipated. Since state aid has been so anemic over the years, we had used a conservative 1% year-over-year increase, and it's slightly higher. The state is providing, in general, 4.4% additional state aid to municipalities across the board. The largest component of that is Chapter 70, which is education aid, and that is kind of driving this increase versus what we had within the revenue manual. Utility revenues are greater than we had published in the revenue manual. This is as we're kind of seeing what we have available, closing out projects that may have exceeded or beat budget expectations, and we're able to use those funds again for a different project. Local receipts. When we initially put the revenue the revenue manual together, we were not accounting for the full budget revenues associated with other communities that contribute through the Central Mass Regional Health District, and that is being updated. Those funds will be received from those communities through local receipts to cover those costs that we provide services to those communities for. There is an update in our thinking, at least at this time, as we'll be engaging in the board in deeper dialogue on what other warrant articles we'll be funding for additional funding for town expenses. I think police details and public works matters and parks and cemetery and recreation setups. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we revised the PEG access figure as we got an update from Celco based on current subscribers, and unfortunately that continues to go down. So those are the changes from October to this pre-budget publication timeframe. And then we'll just move on to the municipal budget forecast. So finance and administration, this includes shared operating support. So this is a functional look at the budget on what areas that we expend resources on each and every year. What I want to focus on these slides is, unfortunately, the amount of money that we have had to remove from department requests. You can see it's almost $3 million across the board in all these line items. We only have so much funding that's available in accordance with the caps, and we've had to reduce almost every department's budget request. So the funding that we are providing is higher, most significantly across the public safety line items, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then public works and human services. The vast majority of the administration and finance increase, since it includes shared operating support, is the funding that's going to health insurance and those types of shared operating support rather than administration and finance functions. Move forward. So looking at shared operating support, just with a little bit more detail, you can see we're increasing the recommended budget for group health and life insurance by about $1.7 million, or 9.7%. This accounts for the 8% premium increase, and then some anticipated growth in more employees taking our health insurance. That component of it, we normally trend about 5% additional subscribers for active employees, and we oftentimes don't see that type of increase, and when that occurs, we make adjustments at the special town meeting in the fall to push these resources to some other bucket where we'll need them, but we don't want to be short going into the budget in the start of the fiscal year. So then this is just kind of the back office stuff. General insurance, we're looking at a 7% trend increase, and I'll focus a little bit on that personnel board, salary and schedule, professional improvement line item that I talked a little bit about before. So you can see that we're within our cap here. These funds ultimately get distributed out to employee salary and wage line items for a variety of adjustments. Sometimes we hire staff mid-year and it's a higher salary because we had to pay funds out for vacation time or increase the salary to attract the right next candidate. This is our performance increases for staff and other matters that we manage throughout the year. So ultimately, this lands in the operating side of the budget and those other functional categories. But we are funding it less year over year than we had in previous years. So let's talk a little more detail about that 4% expenditure cap on the municipal budget, the $1.4 million of additional funding and where it's going. It goes pretty quick whenever we take a look at things. So we are planning for a 2% cost of living adjustment for non-union staff. That takes about 13% of all new funding. We're holding about 27% of all new funding for collective bargaining, contract negotiations, mandatory step increases for union staff, and pre-negotiated requirements through our collective bargaining agreements. As we move forward from fiscal year 26 into fiscal year 27, the fire department, all ranks except for the chief and deputy chief, their contract is up, and we'll begin negotiating on that later this spring. So we are still finalizing, and FY27 will be the final year that we're implementing all salaries within the operating budget off of any ARPA funding that we had, because it expires on December 31st of this year, and fully integrating them into the operating budget. Vast majority of this funding for the final year is the final quarter of the funding that was dedicated to 4 additional firefighters that was implemented now 4 years ago. We have a lot of non-discretionary expenses that we have to account for within the budget. A 20% increase for natural gas, a 5% across the board increase for electricity and street lights. And those types of costs account for about 11% of all new dollars coming in. And then professional service type line items, about 10% of those costs is website accessibility maintenance, which is a state law that goes in effect later this spring, software licenses and renewals, cleaning contract renewals, things that support a variety of functions across several departments. So that's 960,000 of the 1.4 million. And then that leaves us on the next slide with some of the more discretionary increases that I'm recommending through the budget. We're looking at addressing critical staffing needs within public safety divisions. This continues to be an area within our budget that we're catching up on. Historic understaffing levels, dealing with changing community needs and expectations from our public safety officials. So we're recommending the addition of 2 police captains positions to ensure a command structure for the organization, and one fire inspector. So this will be our first full-time dedicated fire inspector within the department. Currently, these tasks are assigned to firefighters, lieutenants, and captains on an ad hoc basis based upon their shift. And this would be a more traditional Monday through Friday person, bringing both consistency and stability into our fire inspections. Often on reinspection, you won't have, under current situation, you won't have the same person doing the reinspection that did the initial inspection. So we think this will improve public safety. It will help us deal with the technical aspects of the fire code when new buildings are being built, and better support the ongoing needs with both the fire department and the building inspectors department. So this uses up the rest of the money that we basically have available, and at a cost of about $333,000 for these additional 3 positions within the budget. So that is a high-level overview. Of course, we will produce the town manager's budget next week on a line item basis, and I'm happy to go a little bit deeper if there's questions from the board this evening about the budget recommendation. And then, of course, everyone knows the public process that ensues from here will include several public hearings of the Finance Committee and additional discussions at this board about not only the operating budget, but those other areas that we spend through warrant articles for capital improvement plan and other particular projects that require funding. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We had talked about having sort of a central repository. This is where it is difficult. Like, there's only so much you can distill this. It is a very long and detailed process. We try to summarize it, but most people want to know where the details are. So I think that we had talked about from this point on, maybe at every meeting, just as a reminder, like sort of a graphic, this is what's next in the process.
Sure.
Here's where the next public hearings are. But even if we can find a way to have a web page where maybe we continuously update it and we include like this deck and just like a high level summary of what was discussed, I just think that, I know it's overwhelming, and that's typically where, when it's the budget, and more specifically the budget increase, that people want to sort of understand where the money is going. So we lay it all out, but I think we continue to look for ways to make it more available and understandable for everyone. So I'm sorry, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I got some questions, of course. One thing on just a question, clarification on the police staffing. And my question is, and I understand we are resource limited, but is it enough? Because my understanding when Chief Anderson came here and he talked to us about what our actual head count is per resident, and we're well below, I think, the FBI averages from what I recall. I know we're going to be adding more supervision role from the captain standpoint, but do we still have enough, officers out actually on the street that way? I know that solves a big issue that he mentioned, 100% guaranteed. I fully support the fact that we're doing this. I'm just thinking now for just officers in general, and I know we're limited, is there still some concern there from Chief Anderson?
Yeah, there's definitely ongoing concern there. I think we're staffed on each and every shift adequately to address to react to the needs of residents, but not necessarily proactive in a lot of proactive areas like traffic enforcement, larger trucks that are in the community, community engagement type of activities, neighborhood groups or special interest groups. So we don't have that level of staffing, but we have sufficient staffing to be able to respond and react under most circumstances. It becomes every year, I think the chief is doing, both chiefs and all department heads for that matter, we had 17 and a half staff that were requested across the board, and we're funding 3. And they are once again within public safety, and public safety, is getting the lion's share of this additional funding, not just for the 3 positions, but for expenditures as well. So it continues to be an area that we prioritize. The police department budget's going up by 10%, and the fire department budget is going up by 5%. And the police department budget outside of public works is the largest budget that we have. So those are big chunks of money in that limited resource. So I think this is the most important need to address within both departments, and the best that we can do with the resources that we have right now.
And I think just to emphasize what you had said earlier about not only having to present a balanced budget, but, what we're seeing a lot of other cities and towns have done is, we have the stabilization fund, and we're very thoughtful about how we extend it to the point where we can, have the period of time between any, override or, more material tax increase take effect. But, we could easily take that stabilization fund and start, funding these needs with police and fire, which we know are critical, but then we create this recurring expense, that we won't be able to fund based on the budget that we have. So we're sort of trying to make sure that we are measured and responsible, while still, I'm glad to see that we at least are making a little bit of a dent in some of those critical hiring needs.
But there's like this dissonance, I think. Everyone feels their tax bill going up. They feel the squeeze of the increase, but yet we're sitting here and we are unable to fund even a quarter of the requested staff that we're being asked for. 17 and a half staff requested, you said, and we're just doing 3. That directly impacts services that we can provide to residents. And I think it's really important to just call that out and say, the reason why you may not see the increased service at the library or the Council on Aging, or that you feel like the Planning and Economic Development Department can't seem to, cover everything that they need to cover in a way that maybe residents are expecting, or the building inspector's office or the DPW, is because we are living within the cap. We are making really difficult decisions around what is the priority for funding, and not being able to provide additional resources for other departments means that each department is going to continue to providing the service that they have right now, but with less, right? So we're expecting more and providing less or the same, and that's going to create pent-up demand for additional staff and additional resources the farther we get out from the override of 2021. So it's a trade-off, right? I mean, that was our commitment, to make sure that we were able to put the greatest distance between one override ask and the next. But it's not without cost. It's not without impact. You may not see it, but small cracks become bigger cracks the longer you don't fill them. And I just think it's really important to recognize that there is restraint being shown in this budget, but that doesn't mean that there's not going to be that feeling of strain across our municipal departments. Even police and fire, where you are seeing an increase, because it's not the increase that's being asked for, it's not what's needed, it's what we can do right now to provide the best level of service for residents within the dollars that we have, without creating an additional burden on people.
I got more. I just didn't want to
Go
jump
right
in
ahead.
again. One comment I will just make too, I guess the question I have is that the 304,000 of additional state aid is proposed. That's not, hasn't passed. So that's not guaranteed money.
It's not guaranteed. We normally look at the governor's budget as the low water mark. Traditionally, the House and Senate have augmented and gone above and beyond what the governor lays out there. So we feel it's a safe number. Last year, as one example, we still carried the governor's budget and got about $400,000 in more aid once the budget was finalized, but after we were beyond town meeting, then we caught up in the fall.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's proposed and they could go in a different direction in a year.
Exactly. And the one thing I wanted to mention too is I believe you had said you typically plan for 1 point something percent
Yeah,
increase
less than
here.
2%.
Less than 2%, and that's historically what we've seen. And I just want to remind residents, right, the key sources of significant portion of what we get outside of the tax levy is from state aid. And I would argue that it's nowhere near what it needs to be based off of what every resident that lives in this community is paying through other taxation in the state. You're paying state income tax, you're paying sales tax, and we're not getting, I would argue, our fair share back. And I know it's been talked about through the MMA, but I think it's important that as we go through these processes, that there are your legislators, I should say, that are the ones who should be talking about this as well. And I'm not saying they're not, but it should be a super priority when you look at if you want to help locally try to avoid additional costs in the future, we need to be lobbying and get more money from the state because we are very limited, as you said, Beth, about what little resources we have, and that is a big chunk that just has not kept up with what we've seen from a cost standpoint at all. So that's my soapbox on that issue. But I do have one minor technical question too. On the discretionary budget pressure on the municipal budget, you mentioned the cost of living increase of 2%. Where would performance-based salary increases be? Because it's on top of the COLA, correct? That's also available? Where does that?
So that falls within the personnel board line item, which is in the shared operating expense line item, and it's budgeted at $325,000 this year.
Okay.
So it's the last line item on slide 7.
Okay, that's clear. And my last one. It's just more of another, is going through this in inordinate detail for the first time. The way that some of this is reflected, I know it's not 100% clear because like line items such as when you look at charges, offsets and charges other. And there's like this whole concept, and most people wouldn't be familiar with the cherry sheet offsets and whatnot. But there's specific, let's say, charges in there that could be tied specifically to education or to normal operating, such as, I think, charter schools and school choice. So is there a reason, I guess, just for my own edification here, of why some of these buckets don't seem to be allocated to the areas that they're really impacting as much? Like, it just makes it really confusing to kind of see how this whole thing kind of plays out.
Yes, it's complex because the state never actually sends us that money. In
Yes,
some
as
ways.
I learned.
Yeah. So while it's called a cherry sheet because it used to be that color, but it's a state document, and the front side is are all the revenues that they're going to send us, and the back side are all the charges that they're going to levy against us. And that is, if the town of Shrewsbury owes another town money because of, like you gave good examples about certain educational expenses where a student goes out of district and we're responsible for covering some of that. And so the state actually deducts those funds from us from the top line budget, and we don't send it back to them. The state also says that we don't have to appropriate those through a town meeting vote because it's not discretionary. It's not in our control. They're going to take the money from us with whatever they decide. So it gets blended together within single line items when we're presenting our financial overviews, but we can maybe run through a detail of a cherry sheet in a future meeting or at a finance committee to show that the level of detail that the lines are broken out. I'm not sure if that answers your question, or I can try again if.
No, it's, like I said, it wasn't really an answer, it's just, I would say it's complex, like, almost on purpose, I feel like, it's like, it's confusing about how this stuff gets presented to really reconcile everything. But no, it's understandable, and I understand, because of how we do not get, like, for instance, the Chapter 70 money. We don't get what they tell you, because they're taking all of those offsets out of that.
Yep.
So it's like, yeah, you get that much, but you really don't, because we're keeping this other part back. So, no, it's,
And as you mentioned, some of the other revenue sources include, beyond Chapter 70 have strict limitations on that. We get aid for libraries, and that can only be used to fund the
Yep.
library. And we don't go, here's this $76,000 and we give it to the library. It fits into the overall revenue model. And as we're building something that is somewhat digestible in a public meeting on a balance sheet, it does mean that a lot of things get rolled up.
Are you able, I know we're focusing on the operating budget, are you able to provide a preview of the capital budget?
Honestly, not off the top of my head. I'm sorry about
No worries,
that.
no worries.
But it will.
Authentic conversation.
Yeah, just generally speaking, we are proposing $2 million from the outset again. We'd use free cash for that. It will not be, anything really extreme from prior years. There'll be a lot of vehicle replacements, and we're looking at a couple capital needs, larger capital needs in buildings. So whether we can hold the $2 million or not is kind of still to be determined. But at $2 million, it's really just kind of maintaining our capital assets versus adding to them.
That's helpful. Is that something that will be published next week, or that's?
It will not
later?
be. It won't be really detailed out very well until we get to the finance committee hearings and then the warrant review itself in the spring.
That makes sense.
Board members, anything else at this time? Great, thank you, Kevin. Agenda item number 9 is to review and act on authorization for the select board chair to execute a housing production plan certification request letter to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. So based on the subsidized housing inventory, eligible units recently permitted, we believe we are eligible for the 2-year safe harbor under Chapter 40B. So the process requires us to send this certification request letter. And we hope that once the state updates their inventory, we'll reach the 10% for a more permanent safe harbor, at least until the census update. But board members, mostly administrative at this point, and we have discussed in prior meetings our happiness that we will at least achieve this 2-year safe harbor.
Just a clarification, do the units have to be built before the end of the 2-year safe harbor before you're eligible for the 10-year permanent safe harbor?
Yes, they do it.
Just on
Have to be
clarification.
constructed.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
correct.
So if, just to understand the process, so if this gets approved, which is fantastic, like we've been working on this for a long time, then is it upon occupancy permit?
Mhm.
We would refile another letter at that time, which would ask that, based off of our available inventory, now we're in quote-unquote permanent safe harbor. But if they don't get built, then we're kind of in a limbo.
Yes,
Okay.
that's my understanding of the process, and I guess since it's 2026, it'll obviously have to play out in the next 2 years, but how it interacts with the next census and the 10%, I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item number 10 is to review and act on authorization for the Select Board Chief Executive Officer to sign the Massachusetts School Building Authority Commissioning Certificate of Completion for the Shrewsbury Public Schools Oak Middle School project. I'm going to say it all so I can save you the
Yep,
trouble.
please do.
2021027100030 repair program. And so this is just confirming that the requirements with this MSBA funded project have been completed in accordance with program standards. it is a necessary administrative step.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 11 is to review and act on the application for renewal of a Class 1 garage license for PMG Subaru LLC, 247 Boston Turnpike, Shrewsbury, Massachusetts.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 12 is to review and act on the one-day beer and license application of St. Mary's Parish for the St. Mary's Parish Fish Fry to be held at St. Mary's Parish Hall, 18 Summer Street on March 6, 2026, from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Wine and beer
That's
only.
everything. Wine and beer only. I thought the one-day wine and beer license application made that clear,
I
but
move
it's
approval.
wine and brew.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 13 is to review and act on the one-day beer license application for the Shrewsbury Food Truck Festival to be held at Maple Ave Fields on June 5th, 2026, from 4 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Beer only.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. We'll move to correspondence. Item number 14 is an email dated January 28th from Shauna Parker Dalton, 8 East Ave, regarding Smart Growth America Champions Institute, so noted. Item number 15 is an email dated January 29th from Elaine Vadenese, 45 Spruce Street, regarding Spruce Street snow plowing and pedestrian sign replacement. Town has been in contact with Ms. Vadenese, so noted. Email dated February 2nd, 2026, from Brian and Patricia Lake, 108 Oak Street, regarding spectacular project, so noted. Item number 17 is mail received on February 2nd from Timothy McGlinchey, Executive Director of Central Massachusetts Mosquito Control Project, 111 Otis Street, Northborough, regarding state reclamation and mosquito control board's budget notification, so noted. And email dated February 3rd, 2026, from Annika Shaw, 11 Grove Street, regarding repeated snow plowing, blocking driveway, and mailbox requests for permanent solution. And again, town staff has been in contact with Annika Shaw, so noted. Board members, if there is not anything else, that would conclude our agenda, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is now.